Greetings, everyone, and welcome to SpaceWeek Live for Sunday, February 14th, 2021. So, it is February 14th, and you know what that means. Happy sweet 16th birthday to YouTube. That's right. Not only is this the platform you're viewing this stream on, but YouTube actually has an interesting connection to SpaceX and Elon Musk. I apologize for the rough start and the delay. I was trying to get my ducks in a row, and ducks are notoriously unruly when you try to line them up. So, back in 1999, Elon Musk co-founded PayPal as X.com. Then he founded SpaceX in 2002. On February 14th, 2005, YouTube was founded by 3 former PayPal employees, Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and Jawed Karim. Then in November 2006, Google bought YouTube for $1.65 billion. Fast forward 9 years to 2015, when Google partnered with Fidelity to make a $1 billion investment in SpaceX, in return for which Google received a 7.5% stake in the company, and Fidelity got 2.5%. Remember, the first Falcon 9 booster landing wasn't until December 2015, not that long ago. It's been a productive 6 years. Today, Alphabet, Google's parent company, remains one of SpaceX's largest stakeholders. Since SpaceX still isn't a publicly traded company, and may never be, pretty much the only way that you can invest in SpaceX is by investing in Alphabet. And to bring it full circle, remember X.com? X is, in fact, a letter of the alphabet. Bad puns. A side note, as you may be aware, on February 6th we celebrated the third Starman anniversary, 3 years since a SpaceX Falcon Heavy launched Starman in Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster into orbit around the Sun. Since shortly thereafter, this channel has been streaming a cleaned-up replay video of Starman floating through space 24 hours a day for almost 25,000 hours now. Rip my CPU. I wanted to mention that I had to temporarily take down the live speed and distance data from my Starman stream, as well as deactivate some of our Nightbot commands. Since the web API that provides me with the Roadster data has inaccurate numbers now. They're off by millions of miles, and I'm not sure why. So until I find or develop a solution, we'll just have to use the whereisroadster.com link to get the numbers, or whatever other Roadster tracker website you prefer. So before we get into it, well, we've got into it, but before we get into the last week and this week, I want to say I welcome your questions. Please go ahead and ask them in the chat, but make sure to tag my name, Rawspace. Just say Rawspace or @Rawspace, and that way I will be sure to see them when I go back at the end of the stream and cover the questions. Otherwise, if you don't tag my name, I probably won't see it. So last week there weren't actually any launches. But there's still plenty to talk about. So last July, 3 missions launched toward the Red Planet. The United Arab Emirates HOPE mission, the Chinese Tianwen-1 mission, and the United States Mars 2020 Perseverance mission. So on Tuesday, February 9th, the UAE's HOPE Mars orbiter successfully entered an elongated orbit around Mars with a perihelion, or closest point, of 20,000 kilometers, and an apoerion, or most distant point, of 43,000 kilometers. The terms perihelion and apoerion are specific to Mars, a planet named after the Roman god of war, whose Greek name was Ares. And this is totally unrelated. Well, yeah, off topic, but I did a typo in my notes here. I said whose green name, which, I don't know, I find that funny. Anyway, the equivalent terms perigee and apogee apply to orbits around the Earth, and perihelion and aphelion apply to orbits around the Sun. The generic terms are periapsis and apoapsis. Maybe we should use those for all orbits to make it less confusing. So the HOPE orbiter was launched back on July 19th, 2020 on a Japanese H-2A rocket. With HOPE's successful orbital insertion, the UAE became the first Arab country and the 5th country overall to reach Mars, and only the 2nd country to enter Mars orbit successfully on the first try. The first was India back in 2014. The United States and Russia have sent plenty of probes to Mars, but our first attempts were not successful. For a long time, Mars was the eater of space probes. One day later, on Wednesday, February 10th, China's Tianwen-1 Mars orbiter arrived. It launched back on July 23rd on a Long March 5 rocket. And Tianwen-1 is a complex mission consisting of an orbiter, a lander, and a rover. The lander won't descend until May or June, so they begin their mission in a more elongated orbit, and then they bring the orbit closer to Mars over a period of time, and then the lander and rover will descend. The Chinese lander and rover will descend in May or June. I'm not sure of the exact date. But because they're orbiting Mars, the date is flexible. In other news, let's see. In other news, NASA has chosen the Falcon Heavy to launch a lunar gateway component. You may recall talk over the last few years of the Lunar Gateway, or LOP-G, terrible name, which will be used in the Artemis mission. And let's see here. If we read the article, NASA selected SpaceX to provide launch services for the agency's power and propulsion element and habitat and logistics output, the foundational elements of the gateway. So, congratulations, SpaceX and Falcon Heavy. And that one was sort of a no-brainer, but that's good news. So, let's see. In other Artemis news, nothing new this week, but I think we're looking forward to the first Artemis 1 launch, which is an unmanned launch, maybe late this year, but wouldn't at all be surprised if it was pushed to next year due to some challenges with the engines they had in their last static fire test attempt. But we shall see. There's a lot of waiting and seeing in the Artemis program, as well as any development, any spacecraft development program. I mean, even Starship. Yeah, wait and see. So there was a glacial breach in India causing a great deal of flooding, which, well, let's just check out the video and then I'll speak on it.
क्या खतरनाक आ रहा है ये अरे जल्दी आ जल्दी आ जल्दी आ ये गए 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 ऊपर तो
Europe's oldest Percy.
So, yeah. So that flooding was due, and I don't have the like the mortality statistics or whatever on hand, but that glacial breach, meaning a breaking of a glacier causing that extensive flooding in India, is a reminder that we live on the surface of a fragile planet, and it is a reminder that our climate is in fact warming up on the average. You know, your day-to-day might not be too terribly affected, but the overall warming of the planet does have far-reaching consequences on the oceans, on glaciers, on polar ice, on coral reefs, and so hopefully, as tragic as these events are, hopefully they serve as reminders that can help motivate people to keep in mind the importance of mitigating climate change by changing the way that our society and our civilization utilize resources so that we produce fewer carbon emissions, fewer greenhouse gases, and we've already done damage to Earth's ecosystems, but hopefully over the next century or so we can get our act together, which is very difficult because it's something that takes effort on the part of not just individuals such as you and me, but on the part of the politicians and the companies. The companies are profit-driven. It's very difficult to motivate companies, except with carrots and sticks, monetary carrots and sticks. Penalties for carbon emissions, and credits or bonuses of some sort for being environmentally responsible. But China, United States, other big players, India, get your act together, please. Otherwise, we'll have no more glaciers, no more ice caps, and Florida will no longer exist, and we'll need to find a new place to launch rockets from. So, looking ahead to this week, let me get my... Okay, I've got to zoom out here. We've got a wide spread of times here. Okay, looking ahead to this week. Tonight, Sunday, February 14th at 11:21 p.m. Eastern, 04:21 GMT on the 15th, a SpaceX Falcon 9 will launch Starlink 19 from Cape Canaveral. Then a few minutes later, at 11:45 p.m. Eastern, 04:45 GMT, a Russian Soyuz 2.1A will launch the Progress MS-16 supply craft to the ISS. I'll be juggling two streams, so those will be streamed in parallel for you. Then coverage of MS-16's rendezvous and docking at the ISS begins on Wednesday, February 17th at 12:30 a.m. Eastern, 5:30 GMT. A few minutes later, at 12:55 a.m. Eastern, 5:55 GMT, another Falcon 9 launches Starlink 17 from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center. The Starlink mission numbers got out of order due to some delays with Starlink 17 for unspecified reasons. They stated that they were doing checkouts of the system. That's all they said. Again, I'll have dual streams for you at that time. Then on Thursday, February 18th, it's Mars 2020 time, the big show. Coverage of the Perseverance rover's landing on Mars begins at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 18:30 GMT, with an intro and Q&A by me, Rawspace. NASA coverage begins 45 minutes later, and the approximate landing time is 3:55 p.m. Eastern, 20:55 GMT. If you recall, Mars 2020 was launched back on July 30th, 2020, on a ULA Atlas V in the 541 configuration. That's 5-meter fairing, four solid rocket boosters, and single-engine upper stage Centaur upper stage. So, yeah, and that will consist of the Perseverance rover with the Ingenuity drone, which will be deployed at a future date, as well as numerous scientific experiments, cameras, microphone that should be able to capture the sound of landing, which will be interesting, as well as MOXIE, which is a cool experiment that will generate oxygen that will produce oxygen using the Martian atmosphere, which is primarily carbon dioxide. And the MOXIE device is expected to produce about 6 to 10 grams of oxygen per hour extracted from the Martian atmosphere. So sort of a proof of concept, scale it up, and then we'll have a means of oxygen production on the red planet for future astronauts, or perhaps fuel production to be used for liftoff and return to Earth type missions. Lastly, on Saturday, February 20th at 12:36 p.m. Eastern, 5:36 p.m. GMT, a Northrop Grumman Antares rocket will launch the Cygnus NG-15 cargo mission to the ISS. It'll take about 2.5 days to get there, so the rendezvous won't be until after next Space Week. That is it for the coming week. So 2 Starlinks, and a Cygnus, Progress, and the Mars 2020 rover. We would like to welcome brand new member and Rawthling, Cheewee Ng, to the team. If you wish to join Raw Space membership, it's available by clicking the join button in the video. You get access to custom emojis, a colored name in the chat to make your comments stand out, as well as other perks which are defined for you to see. And finally, your questions. Let me go back and see what questions you have. Now, just a reminder: if you have questions, make sure to tag my name, Raw Space. Just say Raw Space, and then it'll be highlighted for me, so I'll see the question. Maria Kutujan, nice cover image with Milky Way and my selfie. So, so thank you, first of all. You know what? Let me comment on that, because I want to switch. I want to show you something. Actually, you know what? What I'll do is spaceship webcam. I screwed myself up here. There we go. All right. Let me find that image, because I want to mention something. It'll just take me a moment. Graphics would be in thumbnails. There it is. Okay, so this selfie. So this is a composite. The sunset photo was by me. The galaxy in the background is not. I composited that in using Photoshop magic, but the photo of me, that's actually, I'm not looking away from the camera toward the sunset. I'm actually looking toward the camera, and that picture was actually a mistake. It was a happy accident, serendipity, if you will, because I was intending to take a selfie of myself, you know, smiling stupidly in front of the sunset with a flash, but the flash didn't go off that time, and so what I ended up with was a silhouette, which actually I prefer much more than the picture where the flash went off. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that. So that was an accident, but I loved the picture. And yeah, that was Jordan Lake over by Raleigh, North Carolina, back when I lived over there. So, moving on. More questions. Sem Valashek for Q&A. What do I think about Starlink filing to become a mobile service provider with the FCC? So I was unaware of any Starlink mobile service provider news, but a mobile service provider, as in like mobile telephone, because Starlink requires the use of this UFO-shaped antenna, which, you know, unless you have it mounted to your head, is not going to be feasible to carry around. I mean, it could be perhaps mounted to a vehicle, you know, I mean, it will definitely be used on ships and things like that, but it could conceivably be used on motor vehicles, although I think the wind might be an issue. But I don't know the details of that filing, so I can't really comment on it too much, except to say that the bandwidth supported by Starlink should be more than enough for whatever mobile use you want to use it for. I mean, whether it's you know, streaming or whatever. I mean, it's, you know, like 100 megabit plus per second, so that's plenty of bandwidth, more than we typically have on through our cellular connections. Scanning for more questions. Nice of Bennu to join us. He got up a little earlier before the live stream started, but then he settled in right before I fired it up. Okay, so Owen Salisbury asks, do you think Starship will be ready for Mars by 2023? Not a chance. Not ready for Mars. I mean, Starship might be, well, Starship should be orbital later this year, and you know, they may be able to pull off their Dear Moon mission within a couple of years, but human certification of Starship will be tricky. You know, it's a very it's a very different flight profile than any other manned mission that's ever been done before. So that is to say, the humans won't be landing in a capsule that will splash down or touch down with parachutes in the desert. They'll be landing in the rocket's upper stage, which is Starship. So the human certification might be a lengthy process. Now, Dear Moon is not a NASA mission. It's a SpaceX mission, in coordination with Yusaku Maezawa, the Japanese entrepreneur and art collector. So it may not be subject to the same level of scrutiny as a regulatory scrutiny or certification scrutiny as for example, an astronaut mission to the ISS. So they may be able to sort of fast track the commercial flights for Starship before Starship would be rated for government affiliated launches, like for NASA. Maybe, but we shall see. So, hopefully the process is smooth and swift, but we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. Obviously, they've done 2 high-altitude test flights of Starship thus far with SN8 and SN9. Both of them ended poorly with a RUD and a rapid unscheduled disassembly and explosion on landing. And the second one was actually uglier than the first. The first, at least, the rocket was vertical when it impacted, but in the second launch it was like 45-degree angle, and going way, way too fast. But assuming they can work through those problems, which I'm sure they will, we'll just have to wait and see what their timeline ends up being. Evan McGregor says, regarding the peri-apo terms, he always uses periapsis and apoapsis, which I agree that would be simpler all around if we just used that, because otherwise you're going to have a different set of terms for every body that's being orbited. So I guess a Jupiter orbit would be Perijovis, Perijovis. I know what was the name of Jupiter in Greek mythology? I don't even remember. But so scrolling down. MVM Motovlog Music in reference to the encouraging climate change or encouraging environmental responsibility. We have to make the carrots and sticks financially viable. Yes, we do. I mean, and that's the tricky part, because additional filters, additional regulatory requirements, these have costs. These have real business costs. And even if the costs are moderate, big business will always resist them, because it means more work and more fuss on their part, and they don't want to have anything to do with it. Business does not care about the environment. They truly do not. The only extent to which a business is going to care about the environment is the extent to which it affects their bottom line by either making their business more appealing to consumers or preventing their business from receiving penalties from the government. So unfortunately, that's just the facts of life. That's how business is. They truly do not care about environmental impact, which sucks. So we have to make them care by hitting them where it counts. Microbyte, save Titusville? Yes, absolutely. Slim Pickens says, glaciers breaking and melting has always happened. Always. That's a good point. The fact that there was a glacial breach is, it may have been exacerbated by the phenomenon of climate change or global warming, if you wish. But yes, glaciers have always burst, and sometimes that results in catastrophe. In fact, one of my favorite geological events of all time was what was it? I don't remember. It was like maybe 100,000 years ago, something like that. Glacial Lake Missoula was basically an inland sea. It was a huge lake in the northwestern United States, in the area of Montana and Idaho, that was dammed by a glacier. The glacier burst spectacularly, and truly biblical quantities of water went cascading across the landscape, producing, like, carving the landscape across Idaho, Washington, and Oregon, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. In eastern Washington, there is a region called the Channeled Scablands, which were created by this breach of Glacial Lake Missoula, or the breach in the glacier that held back that lake, and the land was just literally scoured clean, and it dug out the channel of partially dug out the channel of the Columbia River Gorge as well. That's where the water drained through. So yes, that absolutely does happen naturally, but events such as the glacial breach in India serve as a reminder that we need to do what we can to mitigate our impact on the potentiality of such events in the future. Now, we were not in an ice age currently, and so there are not, massive inland seas that are held back by huge glaciers as there were in, eons past. So, scanning for more questions. Evan McGregor, may be possible to make an auto clicker which copies the data from where is Roadster and pastes it into OBS, maybe. Conceivably. Kludgy, I'd rather have a direct solution. What I really need to do is write my own program to pull the data directly from the JPL Horizons, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory Horizons servers, and perform the calculations locally. But I would need to develop a tool to do that. Sorry for the delay. I'm just scanning for questions. So usually I have the questions gathered for me by one of my moderators, but I'm having to go it alone this week, which is fine. It just means I lose viewers. Okay. MVM Motovlog Music. Thoughts on Starship prototype SN10? Well, if SN10 were anthropomorphized and had a consciousness, I think it would be worried. But again, SpaceX follows a different development path than other launch providers. They have, this process of rapid iteration and testing to failure. And so each failure presents an opportunity for improving the system for the next test. So SN10, they can produce these Starship prototypes more cheaply than traditional, your Boeings and your Northrop Grummons and your ULAs would be able to produce prototype, you know, deltas and atlases and so on and so forth. So they can afford to chew through them more so than those legacy companies would be able to. But I have high hopes for SN10. As for a schedule, looking at the TFRs, we have no TFRs for Boca Chica except for the one that's always there. Looks like they increased the semi-permanent TFR to 7,200 feet MSL just to keep aircraft from flying too close to the ticking time bombs that are those fuel tanks, I guess. But yeah, not sure of a date. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, I have reached the bottom of the chat. Smee Self asks, any news on the Psyche mission? I haven't read any news on it, but let's see. NASA Psyche. So that's a mission to an asteroid, to a metal asteroid. Let's see what JPL has to say about it. So this is a JPL managed mission. Some solar system missions are managed from JPL. Some are managed from the Johns Hopkins Applied Science Laboratory. Some from elsewhere, but this one is a JPL mission. Science goals, science objectives, mission timeline. So, deep space, optical. Okay, Psyche. So, Psyche is scheduled to launch in 2022, and it is scheduled to arrive at Psyche in 2026. So there you go, 2022 to 2026. And then it'll orbit Psyche for a year or two, I guess. There you go. All right. So, one side note, there was a, regarding the Perseverance rover landing on Mars, there was a webinar on that a few days ago featuring ULA CEO Tory Bruno, as well as some others. ULA provided the rocket that launched Perseverance. And so I had asked a question at that time in the webinar if ULA or anyone else are currently working on a launch vehicle for the return of the Mars soil samples that will be collected by the Perseverance rover, because it has these sample containers it's going to fill with Martian regolith and leave them sort of scattered around the Martian landscape. And unfortunately, out of the 20-odd questions that were asked in the webinar, mine was the only one that went unanswered. So take from that what you will. But but that is it. I guess that's it for the week. And I look forward to seeing you again tonight during the dual live streams of Starlink and Progress. And on Thursday at the arrival of Mars 2020. Very exciting. Thank you all for coming. And until then, keep it raw.
So in the same way, in the intervals between this year's leaves, last year's leaves, this generation of people and that generation, the interval is in some ways just as important, some ways more important. than what it's between. Space, night, death, darkness, not being there, is an essential component of being. You don't have the one without the other, just as your buzzsaw has no teeth without having salary. That's the way being is made up.